He was a boy who inherited a farm he'd never seen, from a family he was told had forgotten him. But what he discovered locked deep beneath the soil would change not only his story, but the story of the entire town. If you've ever felt like your past was a closed door, or that you were starting over with nothing but the clothes on your back, then this story is for you. Stick with me, and maybe we can find some answers together. The air in the administrative office of the St. Jude's Home for Boys tasted like stale paper and regret. It was the same air I'd been breathing for 12 of my 18 years, a recycled blend of institutional disinfectant and the faint, lingering scent of other boys' departures. Some left with tearful, reformed parents. Some left with a trash bag of belongings and a bus ticket to nowhere. I was leaving with an envelope. It was my 18th birthday. Freedom, they called it. It felt more like being pushed off a cliff in the dark. Miss Albright, my caseworker for the last 4 years, slid the manila envelope across the gray laminate desk. Her smile was practiced, a careful arrangement of facial muscles that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "Happy birthday, Leo. You're officially a man now." I didn't feel like a man. I felt like a number. 734. That had just expired. I picked up the envelope. It was surprisingly heavy, stiff with what felt like thick cardstock. My name, Leo Sterling, was typed on the front. No address. "What is it?" I asked, my voice raspy. I hadn't used it much all morning. "It's from a law firm, Miller, Abernathy and Finch. It arrived last week with instructions not to be opened until today." She leaned forward, her professional curiosity barely veiled. "It's about your grandfather, Arthur Sterling." The name hit me like a stone in a still pond. Arthur Sterling. A ghost. A myth. The man my file said had surrendered me to the state at age 6, right after my parents disappeared. That was the official word, disappeared. One day, they were there, a hazy memory of a woman's laugh and a man's rough hands. And the next, they were a void. My grandfather, I was told, couldn't handle a child. He'd signed the papers and walked away. For 12 years, that was the only story I had. A story of abandonment. "My grandfather is dead," I said, the words flat and empty. "He passed away 6 months ago, yes," Miss Albright confirmed, nodding. "This is his final will and testament, or at least your portion of it." I stared at the envelope. A part of me wanted to tear it in half, to reject the final word from a man who had never offered a first one. But another part, a smaller, more desperate part, clung to it. It was the only tangible link I had to a life before St. Jude's. I slid my finger under the flap and ripped it open. Inside were 2 things: a heavy, old-fashioned iron key and a single sheet of paper. The letterhead was embossed with the law firm's name. The letter was brief, formal. It confirmed the death of Arthur Sterling and stated that, as his sole heir, I had inherited his entire estate. The estate consisted of one property, a 40-acre farm and residence at 142 Black Creek Road, in a town called Havenwood. A town I'd never heard of. The key, it said, was for the front door. Mr. Abernathy, the lawyer, invited me to his office in Havenwood at my earliest convenience to finalize the transfer of the deed. At the bottom, a handwritten note was scrawled in shaky but elegant cursive. "Leo, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and I've run out of time to tell you myself. Please, go to the farm. It's yours. Everything I did to keep you safe. The truth is under the floorboards. Forgive me. Arthur. The truth is under the floorboards." The words echoed in the silent office. What truth? The truth of why he'd left me to rot in a system that grinds boys into dust. The truth of what happened to my parents. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Miss Albright flinched. Is everything all right, Leo? I folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope with the key. The metal felt cold and heavy in my palm, a solid piece of a life I knew nothing about. Everything's fine, I lied. It's just a lot to take in. She gave me a bus ticket to Havenwood, $100 in cash, my emancipation stipend, and a final, pitying look. Good luck, Leo. Try to make good choices. I walked out of St. Jude's for the last time without looking back. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, the sound of a period at the end of a long, miserable sentence. I stood on the cracked pavement, the midday sun feeling alien on my skin after years under fluorescent lights. The world was huge and loud. I had a key, a letter full of cryptic promises, and $100 to my name. I was free, and I had never felt more lost. The bus to Havenwood left in an hour. It was the only direction I had, so I started walking. The bus ride was a 4-hour journey through a landscape that slowly bled from gray cityscapes into rolling green hills. I watched the world through the grimy window, feeling like a spectator to a life I wasn't part of. Every farmhouse we passed, with its peeling paint and sturdy barn, felt like a silent accusation. This could have been your life, they seemed to say. This is what you lost. I clutched the key in my pocket, its sharp edges digging into my palm. Was I heading toward a home or a haunted house? Was this inheritance a gift or a curse? Havenwood wasn't so much a town as a place where the road widened for a few blocks. It had a single stoplight, a gas station, a diner with a buzzing neon sign, and a row of brick storefronts that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1950s. Miller, Abernathy, and Finch was housed in one of them, its gold-leaf lettering peeling from the glass door. The air inside smelled of old books and lemon polish. A woman with a helmet of silver hair looked up from a typewriter. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Abernathy. My name is Leo Sterling." Her perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. "Oh, of course. We've been expecting you. Go right in, dear. He's in his office." John Abernathy was a man who seemed to be made of tweed and kindness. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a warm, wrinkled face and gentle eyes behind thick spectacles. He stood up as I entered, extending a hand. His grip was firm and dry. "Leo, it's a privilege to finally meet you. I was your grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years. He was a good man." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. I sat in the leather chair opposite his massive oak desk. It was covered in neat stacks of paper, a universe of order and purpose that felt a million miles from my own life. "Your grandfather," he began, leaning back in his chair, "was a very private person. He was also a very deliberate one. He set up this inheritance with precise instructions. The farm is yours, free and clear. The property taxes are paid up for the next 5 years. He didn't want you to have to worry about losing it." Free and clear. The words sounded foreign. Nothing in my life had ever been free or clear. "Why?" I asked, the question raw and unfiltered. If he had all this, why did he leave me there, in that place? Mr. Abernathy's kind eyes filled with a deep sadness. He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Leo, I can't answer that question fully. Arthur didn't share all of his secrets, not even with me. He only ever told me that he was protecting you. He said that putting you in the system was the hardest thing he ever had to do, but it was the only way to keep you off the radar of some very dangerous people. He said he was cleaning up a mess your parents left behind." Dangerous people. A mess. The vague, ominous phrases hung in the air. This was more than just a simple case of a guardian being overwhelmed. What kind of mess? He never specified, the lawyer said, his gaze steady. But he loved you. Of that I have no doubt. He asked about you every time we spoke. He had me check on you, unofficially, twice a year, just to make sure you were okay. He wanted to reach out, but he was afraid it would lead them to you. Them? There it was again. A faceless, nameless threat. It felt unreal, like something from a movie, but the fear in the lawyer's voice, the genuine sorrow for my grandfather, that felt real. He slid a thick folder across the desk. This is the deed, the title, and some other paperwork. It's all in your name now. He also left you this. He handed me a second envelope, this one smaller and made of thick, creamy paper. My name was on it, in the same shaky cursive as the note. What about the note? I asked, my hand hovering over the new envelope. The one with the key. It said the truth, was under the floorboards. Mr. Abernathy nodded slowly. He told me he'd left you a road map. I don't know what it leads to. He just said that when you were ready, you would find what you needed to understand. He trusted you, Leo. He trusted that you had his strength. I didn't feel strong. I felt like a leaf in a storm. I took the envelope and the folder, my new life contained in a few sheets of paper. Mr. Abernathy gave me a map to the farm, circling the long, winding dirt road called Black Creek. It's about 3 miles out of town, he said. The house has been empty for a while, so it might need some work. There's a general store here in town for supplies. If you need anything, and I mean anything at all, you call me. My number is on the card. I thanked him and left, the little bell on the door chiming my exit. Back on the quiet street, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows. I looked at the map, then in the direction of the open road, the farm, my farm. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, there was a place on a map that was supposed to be mine. With the dead man's key in my pocket and his mysterious letter in my hand, I started walking toward whatever waited for me at the end of that road. The walk to Black Creek Road was longer than I expected. The paved road gave way to gravel, and then to a packed dirt lane that was more potholes than road. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and pine. By the time I saw the rusted mailbox half hidden in a tangle of overgrown weeds, my legs ached and my t-shirt was stuck to my back. The name Sterling was barely visible beneath a film of green moss. This was it. I turned onto the driveway, a long, rutted track that wound through a stand of ancient, looming oak trees. And then I saw it. The house stood on a slight rise, silhouetted against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. It was a classic 2-story farmhouse with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. But it was a ghost of what it must have been. The white paint was peeling away in long strips, revealing weathered gray wood beneath. Several windows were boarded up, and the porch roof sagged dangerously on one end. To the left stood a massive barn, its great doors slightly ajar, looking like a mouth open in a silent scream. The whole place was being slowly reclaimed by nature. Weeds choked the flower beds, and ivy crept up the porch columns like skeletal fingers. It was desolate. It was decaying. And it was all mine. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't a home. It was a ruin, a monument to neglect. Was this my grandfather's idea of a gift, a final cruel joke? I walked up the creaking porch steps, avoiding a hole where a board had rotted through. The front door was solid oak, its surface scarred by years of weather. The keyhole was dark and intimidating. I took out the iron key Mr. Abernathy had given me. It felt ancient in my hand. With a deep breath, slid it into the lock. It turned with a harsh, grinding screech, the sound of time being forced to move again. The door swung inward on a groan of protest. The air that rushed out was thick and musty, the smell of trapped memories and dust. I stepped over the threshold into the darkness. I fumbled along the wall until my fingers found a light switch. I flicked it, not expecting anything to happen. To my surprise, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow over the entry hall. Everything was covered in a layer of fine gray dust, a shroud for a life that had ended months ago. To my right was a living room, where furniture sat draped in white sheets like a congregation of ghosts. To my left, a staircase led up into the shadows. Straight ahead, a hallway led deeper into the house. It was silent. Not the sterile, buzzing silence of St. Jude's, but a deep, organic silence. The silence of wood settling, of mice skittering in the walls, of a house holding its breath. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The kitchen was a time capsule. A calendar on the wall was still turned to a month from 6 months ago. A coffee cup sat by the sink. It felt like the owner had just stepped out for a moment, not forever. There was a profound loneliness to the place that resonated with my own. This house and we were both abandoned. I found my way back to the main hall, my eyes drawn to the second envelope Mr. Abernathy had given me. I sat on the dusty bottom step of the staircase and carefully opened it. Inside was another letter, in the same cursive. "Leo, I hope you made it here. I hope you can see past the dust and the decay. This place was my sanctuary, and I pray it can be yours too. I know you have questions. I know you must hate me. I don't blame you. The answers you want are here, in this house, but you must find them. I can't just give them to you. You need to understand the weight of them. Start in the heart of the house, where the fire burns. Look for what is out of place. Yours, Arthur, the heart of the house, where the fire burns, the living room." I got up and walked back into the room with the sheet-covered furniture. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth black with old soot. It was cold and empty now, but it was undeniably the heart of the room. Look for what is out of place. I ran my hands over the rough-hewn stones of the mantelpiece. Nothing. I knelt and peered into the fireplace itself. Just ash and a rusted grate. I stood back, scanning the entire structure. The stones were all gray and brown, fitted together in a rustic, uneven pattern. Except for one. Near the bottom, to the right of the firebox, was a single stone that was slightly darker, its surface smoother than the others. It didn't quite fit. My breath caught. I pressed against it. It didn't move. I tried to wiggle it, to find a purchase with my fingertips. Nothing. Frustrated, I pushed harder, putting my shoulder into it. It gave a low groan and then scraped inward, revealing a dark, hollow space behind it. My heart was pounding now. Reaching into the cold darkness, my fingers brushed against a small metal box. I pulled it out. It was a simple tin lockbox, the kind you might keep petty cash in. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, was a small brass key. It was smaller than the front door key, more intricate. There was also another folded note. My grandfather, it seemed, was a man of many notes. "This key opens the cellar. The door is in the kitchen pantry. I had to keep it locked for a reason, Leo. What's down there has been kept safe for a very long time. Be careful. Not all truths are meant to set you free. Some are just heavier chains. The cellar." The pantry was a small walk-in closet off the kitchen. At the back, half hidden behind a stack of old newspapers, was a thick, wooden door bolted with a heavy-duty deadbolt. The brass key fit perfectly. I turned it, and the bolt slid back with a satisfying thud. I pulled the door open, revealing a steep, narrow set of wooden stairs descending into blackness. A wave of cold, earthy air washed over me, smelling of damp soil, stone, and something else, something like secrets. There was no light switch. I used the flashlight on the cheap phone St. Jude's had given me, its beam cutting a nervous path into the dark. The steps were sturdy but slick with a fine layer of grime. I took them one at a time, the darkness swallowing me whole. At the bottom, I stepped onto a packed earth floor. The cellar was huge, much larger than I'd expected, stretching out under the entire footprint of the house. The stone foundation walls were damp to the touch. The air was frigid. Wooden shelves lined one wall, holding dusty jars of what looked like preserved vegetables, their contents murky and ancient. In the center of the room, sitting alone like a sarcophagus in a tomb, was a large, sea-worn wooden trunk. It was bound with iron straps and secured with a heavy, rusted padlock. This had to be it, the final destination of my grandfather's scavenger hunt. But there was no key for the padlock. I searched the cellar, my light dancing over cobwebs and shadows. Nothing. I went back upstairs, my frustration mounting. Why lead me all this way just to present me with another locked box? I reread the first note, the one that came with the front door key. The truth is under the floorboards. I had assumed he meant it metaphorically, but what if he didn't? I went back to the living room, my eyes scanning the floor. The floorboards were wide planks of dark, aged wood. I started in one corner, stamping my foot on each one, listening for a hollow sound. Nothing. I worked my way across the room, my frustration growing with every solid thud. I was about to give up when my foot hit a spot right in front of the hearth. The sound was different. Not hollow, exactly, but a deeper, duller echo. I dropped to my knees, my fingers probing the seams between the boards. One of them felt slightly raised. I dug my nails into the crack and pulled. It was stuck fast. I ran to the kitchen and found a rusty butter knife in a drawer. Forcing the blade into the seam, I pried with all my strength. The wood groaned, and then with a sharp crack, the board splintered but lifted. Beneath it was a small, hollowed-out space, and inside, lying on a piece of velvet cloth, was one more key. This one was heavy, iron, and old. It looked like a key to a dungeon. With my heart thundering against my ribs, I took the key back down to the cellar. It slid into the rusty padlock on the trunk with a perfect metallic click. I twisted it. The lock sprang open. I lifted the heavy iron hasp and slowly, reverently, raised the lid of the trunk. The smell of old paper and cedar washed over me. The trunk was filled to the brim with stacks of letters, tied in bundles with faded ribbon. There were dozens of them. On top of the first bundle was a single, sealed envelope, again addressed to me in Arthur's hand. But that wasn't all. Beneath the letters I could see the edges of something else. I reached in and my fingers brushed against paper, not letters. Cash, stacks of it. $100 bills bound with rubber bands. There had to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. My mind reeled. The letters. The money. This was it. The truth. I sat on the cold cellar floor, the beam of my phone's flashlight illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. I picked up the main letter from the top of the pile, my hands trembling so badly I could barely break the seal. This was the moment everything changed. The moment the story of Leo, the abandoned orphan, either ended or truly began. I took a deep, shaky breath and started to read. The letter was long, several pages filled with his elegant, spidery script. The words were a confession, an apology, and a warning, all rolled into one. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then you have found the beginning of the story I never had the courage to tell you. I must start by saying I am sorry. Sorry for the silence, for the absence, for the life you were forced to live. I want you to know that not a day went by that I didn't think of you, that my heart didn't ache with the choice I made, but I need you to understand why I made it. Your father, my son, was a good man at his core, but he was a gambler, not with cards, but with opportunities. He was always chasing the next big thing, the shortcut to a better life. He and your mother poured everything they had into a local land development deal with a company called Obsidian Corp. They were promised a fortune. The man who ran it, a charismatic predator named Marcus Thorne, sold them a dream. But it was a lie. The deal was a scam designed to bleed small-time investors dry. Your parents lost everything. But they didn't just lose their money. They had discovered that Thorne wasn't just a con artist. He was laundering money for some very dangerous people. He was using his development projects to wash cash from organized crime. Your parents, in their desperation, decided to go to the authorities. They gathered evidence, documents, account numbers, a ledger. They were going to expose him. They never got the chance. The day before they were supposed to meet with a federal agent, they disappeared. The police said they ran off to escape their debts. I knew better. Thorne had them silenced. I couldn't prove it. No bodies, no evidence. Just a clean, cold vanishing act. And then there was you, a 6-year-old boy whose parents had just made an enemy of a monster. Thorne knew about you. He made it clear to me, through a very unsubtle threat, that as long as I kept my mouth shut and the evidence your parents collected never saw the light of day, you would be safe. He would let you live. But I knew he would always be watching me, watching you. You were his insurance policy. I couldn't protect you here, not on my own. Any life I gave you would be one lived in the shadow of that man, waiting for his paranoia to boil over. So I made the most painful choice of my life. I gave you to the state. I made myself disappear from your life, so you could disappear from his. A ward of the state, lost in the system, is much harder to track than a boy living with his grieving grandfather. I let the world think I was a broken old man who couldn't handle the responsibility. I let you think I had abandoned you. It was a lie to save your life. Every year of your childhood spent in that home was a year you were safe from him. It was a terrible price, but one I paid willingly. The money in this trunk is what I could scrape together. It's for you. A fresh start. Take it, leave this town, leave this farm, and never look back. Build a life for yourself somewhere new, somewhere he can't find you. This is the only gift I can give you now, a chance at a life free from the ghosts of this place. Please, son, forgive me for the pain my choice caused you. It was the only way I knew how to love you. Arthur. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. The story I had told myself for 12 years, the story of a grandfather who didn't want me, crumbled into dust. He hadn't abandoned me. He had sacrificed everything, his reputation, his relationship with me, his own heart, to protect me. The cold knot of resentment I had carried in my chest for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a wave of profound, aching grief. I cried for the boy who grew up feeling worthless. I cried for the old man who had to live with his terrible necessary secret. I cried for the parents I never knew, who died trying to do the right thing. I sat there in the cold, damp dark of the cellar for what felt like hours, the letter clutched in my hand. The world had been turned upside down. My entire life was built on a foundation of lies, but they were lies meant to shelter me, not harm me. And now I was faced with my own choice. Arthur's instructions were clear. Take the money and run. Disappear just like he had made me disappear. It was a tempting offer, a clean slate, enough money to go anywhere, be anyone, to finally leave the ghost of Chalasser 734 behind. But then my eyes fell on the rest of the trunk, the stacks of letters, and I remembered Arthur's other words. This is the beginning of the story. This letter was just the first chapter. What was in the others? I reached for the first bundle. The ribbon was so brittle it crumbled in my fingers. These letters weren't from my grandfather. They were addressed to him. The return address on the first one I picked up made my blood run cold. Obsidian Corp. I opened it. It was a formal offer letter dated 2 years ago from Obsidian Corp. To purchase the farm. They were offering a generous sum, well above market value. Tucked behind it was a copy of my grandfather's reply. A single sentence written in his firm hand. This land is not for sale. I went through the bundle. There was another letter from Obsidian 6 months later, the offer significantly higher, and another rejection, and another, each offer more aggressive than the last. The final one was dated just a week before he died. The offer was astronomical, enough money to live in luxury for the rest of your life. And pinned to it was a small, typed note with no signature. This is your last chance, old man. Sell us the farm, or we'll find another way to take it. We know about the boy. He's turning 18 soon. It would be a shame if he had an accident right after he aged out of state protection. The threat was no longer veiled. It was raw and direct. They were still watching. They knew about me, and they wanted this farm. But why? Why was this dilapidated piece of land so important to them? It didn't make sense. Unless the farm wasn't just a farm, unless the evidence my parents had collected wasn't lost. I looked around the cellar, at the stone walls, the packed earth floor. My grandfather's note had said, "The truth is under the floorboards." Plural. I had found the key under a floorboard in the living room. But what if there was more? What if he meant it literally, down here, in the one place he kept locked? My phone's flashlight was starting to dim. I had to find out. I started in a corner, tapping the ground with the heel of my boot. Packed earth, stone, packed earth. It was a slow, methodical process. I moved across the floor, my hope dwindling with each solid thud. I was near the back wall, almost ready to give up, when my boot hit something that made a different sound. A hollow, wooden echo. I dropped to my knees, my hands scrabbling at the dirt. It was loose, as if it had been disturbed before. I dug, frantically, my nails, filling with cold soil. About 6 inches down, my fingers hit wood. I cleared the dirt away, revealing a small square trapdoor, its surface flush with the packed earth around it. It had a small inset iron ring. I hooked my fingers through it and pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted, revealing a dark, cavernous space beneath. A new smell wafted up, not just damp earth, but something else. The dry, acidic scent of old paper and ink. I shone my fading light into the hole. It was a small, stone-lined compartment, about 3 feet deep, and inside was another metal box. This one was larger, heavier, like a military footlocker. It wasn't locked. I reached down, my muscles straining as I heaved it up and out onto the cellar floor. It was cold to the touch. I took a steadying breath and opened the lid. My grandfather's letter had told me to take the money and run. He had given me an escape, but what lay inside this box was not an escape. It was an anchor. It was a reason to stay. It was the truth he'd tried to hide to protect me. It was the ledger. It was a thick, leather-bound accounting book. The first page had my father's neat handwriting. Evidence log, Obsidian Corp. Inside, page after page was filled with dates, names, and numbers. It detailed a complex web of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and illegal transactions. It was a meticulous record of Marcus Thorne's criminal empire. Tucked into the back of the ledger were copies of bank transfers, sworn affidavits from other people he'd scammed, and a hand-drawn map. The map was of my grandfather's farm. Several locations were marked with an X. This was it, the evidence my parents had died for. The reason Thorne had been hounding my grandfather for years. He wasn't trying to buy a farm, he was trying to buy a tomb. He was trying to bury this box and everything it represented. My grandfather hadn't destroyed it. He couldn't. It was his son's last legacy. So he hid it here, in the safest place he knew, protected by a locked door and a layer of earth. Now, I understand some of you watching this might be thinking, this is where the story gets exciting. This is where he becomes a hero. But I want to be honest with you. Sitting there in that dark, cold cellar, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt terrified. I was an 18-year-old kid with no family, no resources, and $100 to my name. In that box was evidence that could destroy a powerful, dangerous man. A man who had, in all likelihood, murdered my parents and threatened my life. My grandfather's voice from his letter echoed in my head. Take the money and run. He had given me an out, a life of peace, of anonymity. All I had to do was close the lid on this box, bury it again, take the cash from the trunk, and disappear. No one would ever know. I could be free. And for a moment I considered it. I truly did. The life I'd had was so hard, so empty. The thought of an easy future was intoxicating. A future without ghosts, without threats, without this crushing weight of responsibility. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to ask you to pause for a second. Have you ever been at a crossroads like that? A moment where you have to choose between the easy path and the right one? Between your own safety and someone else's legacy? It's a heavy, lonely place to be. I know there are people watching this who have faced those moments, who have had to make impossible choices. If that's you, I just want you to know I see you. You're not alone in that feeling. This community we're building here, it's for people who get it. People who know that the hardest choices are the ones that define us. Now, let's get back to the cellar. So there I was, sitting in the dirt, the fate of my family's story resting in my hands. I thought about my parents, these people I barely remembered. They had chosen to fight. They had faced down a monster because it was the right thing to do, and they had paid for it with their lives. I thought about my grandfather, Arthur. He had chosen to protect me. He had sacrificed his own happiness for 18 years to keep me safe. He had lived a lonely life, carrying this burden, hounded by his enemies all for me. And now it was my turn to choose. Could I honor their sacrifices by running away? Could I take the money and let Marcus Thorne win? Let him get away with what he did to my family and to who knows how many others. The money in the trunk felt dirty now, tainted. It wasn't a gift. It was a test. I looked from the cash to the ledger. One represented a life of ease, bought with silence. The other represented a life of purpose, earned through struggle. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but underneath it, something else was growing. A slow, burning anger, and a sense of duty. I was a sterling, my parents were fighters, my grandfather was a protector. This farm, this land, this ledger, this was my inheritance, not the money, the fight. I closed the lid of the footlocker. I didn't bury it. I carried it upstairs, its weight a solid, grounding presence. I left the money in the trunk in the cellar. I didn't want it. I walked through the dark, dusty house, which no longer felt like a ruin. It felt like a fortress. My fortress. My home. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I spent that night on the living room floor, wrapped in one of the dusty sheets from the furniture, the footlocker beside me like a guard dog. I didn't sleep. I watched the moon move across the sky through the grimy windows, and I made a plan. I wasn't going to run. I was going to finish what my parents started. The next morning, I walked the 3 miles back into town. I didn't go to the bus station. I went to the diner and spent $3 of my $100 on a real breakfast, the first one I'd had in years that wasn't served on a plastic tray. Then I went to see Mr. Abernathy. He looked surprised to see me so soon. I walked into his office, carrying the heavy footlocker, and set it down on his polished oak desk with a loud thud. My grandfather told me the truth was under the floorboards, I said, my voice steady. He was right. I opened the box. I showed him the ledger, the documents, the map. I told him everything. I told him about the letters from Obsidian, the escalating offers, the final, chilling threat. As he listened, the kind, gentle look on his face slowly hardened into one of cold, professional fury. He read through the documents, his eyes sharp and focused. When he was done, he looked up at me and I saw a new respect in his eyes. "Your grandfather was a braver man than I ever knew," he said quietly. "And your parents, my God, your parents were heroes." He paused, his gaze intense. "Leo, do you understand what this is? This is enough to put Marcus Thorne and his entire company away for a very long time. This isn't just a local matter anymore. This is racketeering, money laundering, and very likely evidence in a murder investigation." "I know," I said. "That's why I brought it to you." "Thorne is a powerful man," Mr. Abernathy warned. "He has connections. This will be a long and dangerous fight. They threatened you once. They will do it again when they realize you're not selling and you have this." "My grandfather spent 18 years living in fear to protect me," I replied, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "My parents died for this. I'm not going to let it be for nothing. I'm not selling the farm, and I'm not running." A slow smile spread across Mr. Abernathy's face. "Arthur was right," he said, more to himself than to me. "You do have his strength." He stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick, dusty file. "Your grandfather and I had a contingency plan, just in case. He never thought he'd have to use it. He hoped you would just take the money and live a happy life. But he knew you might make this choice." He explained that he had a contact at the FBI, a man who specialized in complex financial crimes, someone he trusted implicitly. He said my grandfather had already established a back channel with him years ago, providing anonymous tips about Thorne, laying the groundwork. This ledger was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle they needed. "We won't go to the local authorities," Mr. Abernathy said. "We don't know who Thorne has in his pocket. We go straight to the top. But you need to be prepared, Leo. Once we make this call, there's no going back. Your life is going to change." "It already has," I said. We made the call. The next 48 hours were a blur. 2 agents from the FBI's regional office drove out to Havenwood. They weren't like the cops I was used to seeing around St. Jude's. They were quiet, serious, and they listened. I sat with them and Mr. Abernathy in his office for hours, walking them through everything, from the locked cellar to the hidden ledger. They treated me not like a kid, but like a key witness. They took the footlocker and its contents into federal evidence. One of the agents, a woman named Special Agent Riley, put a hand on my shoulder before they left. "You've done a very brave thing, Mr. Sterling," she said. "Your family would be proud." The investigation was swift and silent. With the evidence from the ledger, the FBI was able to secure warrants and freeze Obsidian Corp. Lazier's assets. Marcus Thorne was arrested a week later at his lavish estate in the next county. The news reports called him a pillar of the community, a successful developer. They had no idea his empire was built on a foundation of lies and, quite possibly, blood. The case against him was overwhelming. The other investors his company had scammed, emboldened by his arrest, came forward to testify. His entire criminal enterprise crumbled like a house of cards. The media frenzy was intense for a while. Reporters camped out at the end of my driveway. I ignored them. Mr. Abernathy handled the press, feeding them a carefully crafted story that kept me out of the spotlight. I was just the long-lost grandson who had inherited a farm and stumbled upon some old family documents. There was no mention of the threats, no mention of my parents' true story. That was for the courtroom, not the evening news. With Thorne behind bars and his company in ruins, the threat was gone. The ghosts that had haunted my family for nearly 2 decades had finally been put to rest. But my story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. I was left with the farm, 40 acres of neglected land, and a house full of memories that weren't mine. For the first few weeks, I was adrift. The fight was over, and the silence that followed was deafening. I would wander the fields, the overgrown grass brushing against my jeans. I'd sit on the sagging porch and watch the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The house was still a wreck. The barn was on the verge of collapse. The task of bringing it all back to life seemed impossible, overwhelming. One day, Mr. Abernathy drove out to see me. He found me in the barn, trying to shore up a rotting support beam with a piece of scrap wood. "You look like you could use a hand," he said, smiling. I just grunted, sweat dripping down my face. I don't even know where to start. Maybe my grandfather was right. Maybe I should have just sold this place. "Don't you dare say that," he said, his voice firm but kind. "This place isn't a burden, Leo, it's a legacy. It's proof that you won." He handed me a thick envelope. "Speaking of which, this is for you." I opened it. It was a check from the victims' restitution fund set up by the federal court after they liquidated Thorne's assets. It was a significant amount of money, not a fortune, but more than enough to fix the farm and live comfortably for a while. It was the money Thorne had stolen from my parents, finally returned. "This is your family's money, Leo," Mr. Abernathy said. "Clean money. Use it to rebuild. It's what they would have wanted." And that's what I did. I started small. I hired a local crew to help me replace the roof on the house and stabilize the barn. I learned how to use a chainsaw, how to mend a fence, how to plow a field. The work was hard, grueling, and honest. With every nail I hammered and every post I set, I felt like I was not just rebuilding a farm, but rebuilding myself. I was putting down roots, literally and figuratively, in the soil my family had fought and died for. The people in Havenwood, who had at first been wary of the stranger who had inherited the old Sterling place, started to warm up to me. The owner of the general store would give me a discount on supplies. An old farmer down the road would stop by to offer advice on which crops to plant. They had all known my grandfather. They respected him, and through him they started to respect me. I wasn't Harn 734 anymore. I was Leo Sterling, the boy who came home. It's been 5 years since that day I walked out of St. Jude's. The farm is thriving. The house is no longer a ruin, it's a home, filled with light and warmth. The fields are green with alfalfa in the summer, and the barn is full of hay in the winter. It's a quiet life, a good life. I never did touch the money in the trunk in the cellar. I left it there. It felt like it belonged to Arthur, a symbol of his desperate, loving sacrifice. My inheritance wasn't the cash. It was the land, the name, and the chance to live a life of purpose. The scars of my past are still there, they always will be, but they don't define me anymore. They are a part of my story, a reminder of where I came from and the choices that led me here. The greatest truth my grandfather left me wasn't in the ledger or the letters. It was in the house itself. He gave me a home, not just a piece of property. He gave me a place to stand my ground, to fight for what's right, and to build something real. He taught me that inheritance isn't about what you're given, it's about what you choose to do with it. I know this story has been a long one, and if you're still here, I want to thank you. It means a lot to me to be able to share it. My journey started from a place of feeling completely alone and powerless, defined by a story of abandonment that wasn't even true. And I guess the lesson I learned, the one I want to share with you, is that we all have the power to reclaim our own narrative. Sometimes the secrets we're afraid to uncover are the very things that will set us free. And sometimes the hardest choice, the choice to stay, to fight, to rebuild, is the only one that can lead you home. So, what did this story teach you about the meaning of home or the weight of family secrets? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing our stories is how we find our strength and how we realize we're not alone. If my story resonated with you, consider subscribing. We're all just trying to find our way, and maybe we can help each other do that, one story at a time. Thank you for listening.